All right.
So the question that I have, or the thing I want to get your thoughts on, is kind of practice related. Um, but yeah, kind of practice related. So the my sits at the moment, kind of building on what we've been speaking about as the last few sessions. You know, there's often kind of rhythm to it. You know, you sit down and start breathing and experimenting with the long and the short breath, and it ends up kind of, I end up being much more drawn to the long breath and kind of like long breathing as I'm kind of moving awareness through my body, and it feels really, really good, and I kind of get into a bit of a satisfaction loop with that. And eventually a kind of
Well, yeah,
smile,
you're getting the idea. Yes, that's exactly correct. Uh-huh.
and a big smile emerges on my face, and I kind of tap into that feeling, and suddenly that kind of grows exponentially, and then there'll be like waves of that, and that's lovely. um, and I read Lee Brassington's book on the jhanas, which I found interesting in terms of how the second and third jhana basically, and kind of moving from like kind of really big, kind of quite coarse, rapturous kind of sensation, to kind of dropping a little bit and letting the kind of sukha predominate over the piti, and how that kind of often relates to like a slight drop in your awareness in the body from kind of up here to the chest
Mm-hmm.
area. And I found that very interesting. And there's been a few times where it's even kind of dropped lower into the gut, and it's felt like completely still and very, very tranquil, and that's been beautiful as well. So there's all those sorts of experiences, and also sometimes those experiences aren't there. Sometimes it's a bit distracted and a bit dull, and that happens. But my relation to those sits is very different now. We spoke about that last time. Said, of course, there's, you know, what in life doesn't go through that, and I've sort of realised that the question is do I choose to use those ups and downs as a vehicle to make myself suffer with?
Hello, kitty.
Yeah, so realizing that the ups and downs of that does not have to equate with me suffering, or I don't know, negative self-talk or anything like that. That I can just be quite chilled about it.
Okay. Basically, um, that happens on a regular basis, what you're talking about. And let's go for the sequence of events so that we can kind of describe it. The first thing that happens would be that you're taking a long, deep breath and you're getting into a state of satisfaction. And then you begin to investigate some other aspect, all right, like deepening jhana or whatever like that. But then while we're doing that, we begin to forget about the breath.
Mm.
And then the breath will go back to normal. And then the brain's not getting enough oxygen to maintain that state. And in fact, what it does is it kind of goes to sleep, where we get into a state we call drowsy
Mm.
or tired. This is very common in workaday world when people are sitting at a desk,
Mm.
but it can happen to truck drivers too.
Mm.
And that is, they're sitting and they're doing something and they're not watching the breath. And so the reptilian brain kind of goes into shutdown mode,
Mm.
which means then there's not enough oxygen to be really sharp. And so if you're seeing any of that stuff as it arises, remember to watch it while you're still consciously breathing in and out.
Mm.
That's one of the things that can be developed, is you can develop these skills so that you're doing it while you're maintaining those long deep breaths.
Mm.
That in fact, that was a discussion with Bhikkhu Buddhadasa and Santikaro about the title of the book, Mindfulness While Breathing. What we wanted to do, mindfulness of breathing or whatever like that, because it is actually anapanasati, but anapanasati in the Pali is just a shorthand. And so how do we say it? And that they chose mindfulness while breathing, and that's an important point. Is that we never I don't like words never. Never. Never say never, not ever again. That we continue to watch the breath with that original thought. If the mind is not on the breath, when the mind wanders away from the breath, never mind, start again. Always use that as an anchor. Even if you've gotten the mind into, let us call it, the meditative state, and then something arises that's really worth an investigation, then investigate that while breathing. As opposed to, let's investigate that. Let's forget about the breathing. We'll go back into a dull state, and that happens almost without us knowing it. It's almost like, does the computer know when the power goes off? When you pull the plug on the computer, it's off. It does not know that it's off. It's just off.
Yes. Do you know what? This is very handy actually, because that actually, we kind of describe the beginning arc quite often of the meditation sessions. The final arc is the kind of main question or thing that I had wanted to speak to you about, and actually you're already addressing it. Because often what happens is then that there's like this cycle of kind of jhana experience, and then it sort of feels like I want to do something with this state, with the mental state that is, or say I'll come out of the intensity of it, but the mind is very, very clear, but there's just not quite such a intense kind of feeling. The Vedana element of it seems to have just kind of reduced, but the mind's still very clear. And at that point, it feels like I want to investigate something with that clarity. But
we're ready to end that chapter and start chapter number, X or whatever. And that is, what is worthy of having in the mind?
Yeah.
What is the definition of wholesome thought? That's the question that you're asking. All right. The Buddha's got an answer for that. And that is that what's really worthy of investigation are the kinds of things that give us worthwhile thought that will actually, while mindfully continuing to deep breathe while we're doing this, will help maintain and sustain that first jhana. Because we do have the rapture and the piti, but it's kind of quiet, but it's certainly satisfying. It's not gone; it's there, but it's not the overwhelming thing. But we continue to watch the breath while we're choosing what's really wholesome, valuable, and worthwhile paying attention to.
And it seems there's so much at that moment in the sits. Like there's the visual elements of what's going on the back of the eyelids. There's often a kind of very subtle auditory element. Then of course there's like the subtle sensation of the breath itself, or the whole body, or do you go back to investigating the pleasure feeling? And it almost feels like there's a banquet of possibilities.
Right. So you're basically asking, the question is, what's worthy of your attention? What would you want to attend to if you were attending wisely?
Yes, and what extent do I'm aware of the kind of like Vipassana traditions where you're attending to the three characteristics and things like that. Like how much do you deliberately? Sometimes it almost feels like to do so would be almost like a kind of intellectual overlay of the experience, and I don't want to play that game of having an idea and putting it on my experience, which I feel is a danger.
All right. In fact, you're right that we've got to find a way of doing what I'm about to talk about without it becoming a concept,
Yes.
but rather a direct experience. Okay. So what I'm turning to now is Sutta number 2, the Sabha Asava Sutta.
Hmm.
And basically, this sutta is laid out in a way that the first set of taints are to be developed through seeing and attending wisely. So that if we pay attention and attend wisely to something, then that's better than to attend to the kinds of things that we normally attend to.
Mm.
Okay, like the past or the future or whatever like that. And in fact, this is so much better that we could call all of that stuff not only worthy, not not worthy of our attention,
Mm.
but also it's a hindrance to
Mm.
actually be attentive to, mindful of, watching of the things that are really truly worthy of attention. Okay, so now I'll read this little passage and we'll continue on after that. And what are the things unfit for attention that he does not attend to? These are the things such that when he attends to them, the unorigined taint of sensual desire arises, and all of the other things of the hindrances, and the origin um, taints of ignorance increases. These are the things unfit for attention that he does not attend to. And what are the things fit for attention that he does attend to? These are the things such that when he attends to them, the unarisen taint of sensual desire does not arise in him, and etc., all the way through, and the arisen taint of ignorance is abandoned. So these are actually what we're talking about there is that when you're paying wise attention, that we're turning that second noble truth on its head.
Mm.
Because these are actually starting with sensual desire, and then ill will, and then ignorance. And Bhikkhu Bodhi, God bless his pea picking heart, left all of that stuff out with an ellipsis.
Mm.
And most students will just read right through that
Mm.
without understanding, oh, this is the second noble truth that we have to attend to wisely in this regard, so that the unarisen or the arisen taints of ignorance are abandoned in us, and we're looking at things very clearly. And these are the things fit for attention that that he attends to. By not attending to things unfit for attention, and by abandoning to things fit for attention, unarisen taints do not arise in him, and the arisen taints are abandoned. He attends wisely. This is suffering. He attends wisely. This is the origin of suffering, which we just talked about. He attends wisely. This is the cessation of suffering. And actually, what they're saying is right there, you're attending wisely to, oh, this is what it's like to be in the third noble truth. This is freedom from suffering.
Mm.
And that we need to attend to that, to actually see and congratulate ourselves for the fact that we are now in this moment free from suffering.
Mm.
And we attend wisely to that. And then we attend wisely to this is the path or the way leading to the cessation of suffering. All right. So, in a conceptual way, he's talking about um, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path.
Mm-hmm.
But when we take the concept out of it and look at what he's actually doing, it says, no, we're attending to uh, uh, what is suffering in the sense that we're attending to make sure that unarisen taints don't arise. And any arisen taints, which, and if they do arise and we see them, then we abandon them. This
Mm.
is worth what we're doing. Now, in fact, we're talking about a way to practice the Eightfold Noble Path, but the Eightfold Noble Path, when you understand it conceptually as to how to practice it, it's actually brilliant.
Mm.
It's a magnificent teaching that the Buddha has here. That this is actually what we do is we spend our time seeing the Four Noble Truths in its operation, in the sense of this is one's right view, this is one's right sati. I do remember.
Mm.
I do have right action, that my action is very easy, very consistent, leading to being energetic. And
Mm.
I do have right attitude. I do have the attitude of a winner and do not have the attitude of a loser. And that I do see things clearly because I am not inspecting in a microscopic way, but it's opening. It's almost like that most people in the West think that meditation is something like a telephoto lens,
Mm.
so that you really, really hone in on one little thing. But it's actually better understood to be a fisheye lens or even a rotational lens so that you can get a whole 360.
Mm.
And they were doing those rotations long many years ago. In fact, I remember seeing them back from the 1920s that they would have, um, let us say, a university graduating class. And the
Mm.
photo was only this high, but it was this long, and it had the whole class in it, you know? Okay, so but basically, as they move the camera, the film is moving inside.
My dad
So,
tells a story about his school got photographed and he was on one end and the camera goes like that and he ran around to the other side, so he was in the photo twice. He was on that end and that
so you know exactly what we're talking about.
end.
All right. So that's the kind of awareness that we're looking for, that it's panoramic, not too deeply focused.
Mm.
And yet the jhanas actually is that telephoto lens, is that we really, really hone in on something, but the first jhana is expansive. This
Mm.
is what we mean by applied and sustained thought. It's like the sustaining is making sure that that camera stays on gear while it's walking through that in order to get the whole picture,
Mm.
except that it doesn't move that slowly like the old photos. This is there it goes again. And so this is the way that we begin to practice that. Now, here's the next point, and this is quite marvelous. Because as we're practicing as this, especially the second noble truth, we actually begin to see how the mind operates, which is its operation is in definition, they call it paticca samuppada,
Mm-hmm.
or in the Thai is paticca samuppada. But the paticca samuppada is actually what it means is dependent origins. In other words, this origin was actually dependent upon something else in the beginning. It's almost like the football cannot go into the air until it's kicked,
Mm-hmm.
but it was already prepared for getting kicked. So when it did get kicked, it went in the air. A
Mm-hmm.
stone, a big stone the size of a football, is not quite ready to get kicked. Okay, so when all of the conditions are right, then the event occurs. Well, that sequence of events like that happens within the mind.
Mm.
That's that.
I've noticed that the practice of jhana is very, very good for making you very experientially aware of it, of those connections, because you come to realize the circumstance. I mean, you explicitly asked me to investigate that a few sessions ago. You said, what are the conditions wherein the jhana arises? And I've thought about that a lot, and it becomes very clear. It becomes very clear. And I've also noticed often before I go into jhana, there's this moment where like I realize that everything is a little bit too tight in my like energetically or mentally, and then I just remember to like let go, and that's when the joy just kind of floods, and that's when I enter it. It's like little moments like that where you start to see the patterns and you start to see, if this is the case, then this will be the case most likely. If this is not here, this will not be here.
Yes, and that kind of letting go that you're talking about is often and especially delicious when it's accompanied with a nice sigh.
Yeah.
All right. So now that we understand what the that is worthy of our attention is basically paying attention to this present moment with the map of the Four Noble Truths. And that's the best way to understand it, because until then, the Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Noble Path is not really noble for the student. It's just conceptualized. But now we really begin to see that actually we're living this Four Noble Truths moment by moment. Now, when we attend wisely like this, go ahead.
So I was just going to say, like,
your in-breath set you up.
You are?
You did.
How I can relate that to my current practice now, like the being in the satisfaction loop that you are in when you are going through, when you're working with the jhanas, is such I'm constantly aware this is a very pleasant state to be in. I am with this state. And there's a part of my brain that's able to think that I'm not thinking about the future. I'm not thinking about the past. I am here with this feeling of rapture, with this feeling of joy, with this feeling of tranquility. This is good. And there's that satisfaction, that you've kind of encouraged me to develop in relation to that. And I can relate that to the, to the third noble truth. And I can also relate in the practice that's the second noble truth. I can see what distracts me out of that state. And I can see, it's tension, it's
anxiety,
fear,
sadness,
and I can spot
panic attack.
I can spot these things in my sits, and I can often let them go,
or breathe into them.
Yeah,
that's an important point. Allow yourself to really breathe consciously, with the intention of expanding that feeling. Think of the feeling itself as kind of like a drop of poison, like a drop of adrenaline. And what we want to do is what they do with any kind of poison, and that is dilute it. But when the dog has been poisoned, they make sure that he's fed carbon, special carbon, I forget, atomic carbon, I forgot what it is, energized carbon, but they give it that so that the carbon will absorb the poison. But the important thing is drink water, drink a lot of water, drink a whole lot of water, okay? And in this regard, that's why the breathing is actually going to be able to dilute and break up in the bloodstream that drop of adrenaline that just got turned on, just squeezed out, just a drop of it, just enough to pull you out of your jhana, because you're now aware of it. So you want to breathe into that with the idea that you're going to break it up. You're going to expand the chest almost as if the chest were tight. And so the right way to get the chest untight is by taking a deep breath. And now it's broken up. It's the tightness has become free.
Do you know, I was at in the where was I? The Victoria and Albert Museum. It's a museum in London, and they've got a wonderful collection of Buddhist sculpture. There's all this like early Buddhist sculpture, and they show the Buddha's chest in like a state of great expansion. Like the sculptor's really emphasizing the fact that like there is heroic breathing going on.
Precisely. As opposed to the exact opposite is when they show the downtrodden. An example of that, not to be racist or anything, but there are photos, especially, let us say, Nazi cartoons of Jews. Okay, how are they going to depict them? As bent over, slouching,
Mm,
depressed. And the main thing that's depressed is, again, the lungs, the breathing,
mm,
small chest cavities. So both sides of that are there.
mm,
That not breathing is the sign of a loser,
mm,
being collapsed, being compressed, etc., like that in the chest, in these drawings. And so the heroic side is not necessarily a puffed up chest. In fact,
mm,
you can think of the puffed up chest as somebody who's doing it like that without actually breathing.
mm,
That this is what we're not puffing up the chest. This is breathing and getting the chest to expand.
mm,
All right. Now, continuing on with this topic of what is worthy of our attention, what is wise attention, when we're paying attention to the nobleness of the truth of this moment, in the regard of these things that come up, that's dukkha.
mm,
That's and the source of that dukkha is this old stuff that's in there. And when we begin to investigate Paticca Samuppada in detail, you can begin to see how that stuff arises, so that you can actually catch it.
mm,
But as we're watching this stuff and we're seeing the difference between sukha and dukkha, we
mhm,
can begin to understand that, oh, but it's me when I'm selfish, or
mm,
it's me when I'm in a state of not liking things. That's the state of suffering, that
mhm.
I bring it on.
I've
This,
become so aware of uh, in the last few months of like these little patterns of selfishness and how they directly negatively impact the quality of my moment to moment experience of life.
exactly right. And so by going through this process, that's what this whole sutta point is all about. It says, this is the way leading to the cessation of suffering. Now, when he attends wisely in this way, three fetters are abandoned him: personality view, doubt, and adherence to rules and observances. These are called the taints that should be abandoned by seeing.
Mm,
Okay, and if you'll know, I talk to students about that often, about the society,
mm,
about how we are lied to, and we go along to get along, and
mm,
that we adhere to rites, rules, and rituals in order to gain our happiness. An example of that was, you buy my car and you can be happy.
mm,
Never happens.
mm,
Okay, so it's actually in fact, if you can think of it just this way, this is the law of karma, the belief in the law of karma, that if you do good, you'll get good results, and
mm,
if you do bad, you'll get bad results. There's no guarantee.
mm,
There really is not. The kids see right through that, but
mm,
eventually they take the trip from their parents if they're raised Christian, and they'll begin to believe in it. But the reality is not all good behaviors give you good results.
mm,
In fact, telling the truth can really get you into trouble.
mm,
So, we have these three things. That is personality view. In other words, who really is responsible for this suffering? It's good old number one.
mm,
And that good old number one is also not subject to a God, but only to itself. And it's temporary. So we better get our joy right now, because we're going to die.
mm,
And so our whole way of looking at who we were begins to fall apart, begins to change. And we recognize this is really not about me at all. This is about elimination of suffering. And so our whole idea about who we are begins to change, and our relationship to the world changes. And in that regard, also, doubt begins to melt away. And the way that we can look at doubt melting away is one of the most important steps, the very first step of nobility, the very first step of Anapanasati, of the stream winner or enterer, is when he has firm confidence that I know that no matter how much obstruction the mind is, I can bring it back to this present moment. Well, that takes a lot of practice. Through the ups and the downs and the ins and the outs, and we begin to see that no matter how obstructed the mind gets, no matter how bad I feel, no matter what states I get into, I can come right out of them by just remembering.
Used to identifying with those states, and perhaps we have those moments of awareness in between, you know, like we can be in a bad way for a while and then we can come out and then we can go, oh yeah, you can come out. But to be able to do it more consistently.
Now here, right, exactly. But it's not consistency, but it is repetitive. There will be times when we're stuck in it. No matter how long you're not mindful, congratulate yourself the very first time that you come back to mindfulness. That's the important thing, rather than feeling like, oh, I haven't been mindful for a long time. That's not the point. That's already in the past. Let's be happy right now. Let's come back and do the practice. And when we do that practice over and over and over again, a kind of confidence builds that I can do this.
This is so interesting, isn't it? Because this is what you do when you are first learning to meditate on the breath. It's that exact same cycle, but you're now talking about that in a much bigger sphere to do.
Now in a much bigger sphere, I'm a winner. I can manage it. It does not matter how bad things get. I'm going to do okay.
And this is right sati on a bigger stage.
And so it becomes one's life view, in fact, rather than something that we're practicing in meditation and getting a nice buzz in the moment whenever we do it. Now this becomes lifestyle. That's when you would say, yes, you're on the path. But the first part of that path is that the eradication of the doubt of whether you can actually do it or not. The answer is yes, we can. We can do it. And that's the eradication of the doubt. It's a very basic thing, but once you get the attitude, I can do this. Number two, that this is not about selfishness or me getting something. It's about me enjoying what there is there now, and that I can do that without anything from the outside world. This is happening right here, right now, within. And so those are the three first fetters. And when one is seeing that, then they begin to see also that this path, this Eightfold Noble Path, and this teaching of the Buddha works. It works like nothing else works. And so we come up something with the song like, hi, diddle-dee-dee, the Buddha's path for me. I just made that up. And that's the way that we go. That's the confidence. Now, in fact, we've gotten past the first three, the major parts of the doubt. The first part of the doubt is, who made this mess? Who am I going to get to clean up this mess? Let me go to a doctor. Let me go to a psychologist. Let me take a pill. Let me meditate. Because then the meditation is going to do it for me, you see. All I have to do is sit there, and the meditation is going to take care of me. I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing it, and I expect results. And when we figure out that, oh, no, that's not the way to look at it. It's not the outside world. It's not the meditation itself. It's not the God. It's not my mommy. No one is responsible for the mess I'm in but me. And that's really the second noble truth, is waking up to the second noble truth, that the cause of suffering is my own greed, my own ill will, and my own stupidity. And we kind of accept it that way. And so that's the eradication of the first doubt. The second doubt is this one that we were just discussing first, and that is, are you up to the task? The answer is darn right I am.
Mm.
Okay, you probably heard it in the expression, ye shall know the truth and the truth shall set you free. But
Mm.
first it's going to piss you off.
Mm.
All right. Or as Colonel Jessup said, the truth, you can't handle the truth. Well, this, because that's part of the doubt is, am I up to the task? Can I handle the truth?
Mm.
Can I do this thing? Can I come out of my own suffering? The answer is, this first step of the noble path is, yes, I can. No matter how obstructed the mind gets, I can clean it out. And then the third aspect of it is that with that understanding that I can do it, and with the understanding of how the Eightfold Noble Path works in getting us there, now we have all three of it. I've got the path, I can do the path, and it's nobody's job but mine to do it. And high diddle-de-dee, off we go. Now we're in about the midpoint of Sotapan.
As in the journey towards Sotapanna.
No, this is not, well, you're in the middle of it. You could say, in fact, if you think about it like this, it's like a teeter-totter like the kids have. Well, you know that if you stand on the teeter-totter and walk up, when you get to the middle point, the next step you take, the teeter-totter is going to tilt, and now it's all downhill to get to the other end of the teeter-totter.
Mm.
That's what this is all about, is getting rid of that doubt, getting rid of that personality view, and figure out that we've got the path. That's the midpoint of Sotapan, from the path of Sotapan to the fruit. And now it tilts going downhill. And what that means is now I'm completely determined that I'm going to follow the path. I'm completely determined to be honest with myself about my own faults.
This is resonating a lot with me in terms of like what's been going on in my attitude in the last 3 months, and especially around the doubt thing, because I'm seeing exponentially every day, if I do these things, these very positive things happen. If I allow these things to creep in, these things that cause, the suffering arises. And it's like seeing that very clearly. It does eradicate doubt. It's also interesting, the jhana element is really interesting for doubt, because it's like, it's so clear. It's like, if you do these things and these hindrances are gone, this state will arise. And you're like, and then you experience it and you're like, oh yeah. And it's such a strong
oh yeah.
and it's such a strong experience, and it's so clear. It's like you're seeing that the steps of it work. So it's the beginning of going, actually, maybe this all does. So one question, you were talking about how the Tao relates to personality view. When you say personality view, do you mean non-self? You mean the...
No. Let us say that personality view is the view of self that we thought that we were.
Yes.
And you're beginning to understand, oh no, what I thought I was, I'm not. And I will never know who I actually am, because I'm a moving target.
Mm.
In other words, if you wanted to write down all the attributes that you had about yourself and you wrote them down on a piece of paper, by the time you finish the list, you need to start over again, because the list is now subtly changed.
Mm-hmm. And the insight into Paticca Samuppada is very, very powerful for that, isn't it? Because you become aware that the states that you're in are dependently connected to the inputs that you're putting in.
Right.
And therefore, it would be sort of absurd to identify those states as being you, because they're actually a result of a variety of processes and inputs.
Precisely. Now, the ordinary, uneducated in the Dhamma individual will sing Popeye's song. I am what I am, and that's all that I am. Okay. That's how people see themselves. And now you're beginning to see, oh no, you're not an I am, you're a mess.
Mm.
and to say junkyard, and to know where in that junkyard is the absolute essence of you. That
Mm.
you're a conglomeration, you're not an item. And that sometimes is quite frightening because people want to cling to the idea of a self, and there's no self to cling to. That we begin to see that this is nothing but a process.
Mm.
And the end result is either sukha or dukkha, our choice.
Mm.
We're either going to be in a satisfied moment or we're going to be in an unsatisfied moment. And most people think that, oh, the satisfaction and the dissatisfaction is not up to me, it's up to the events of the outside world based upon conditions, the rites, rules, and rituals of the outside world. For instance, if I'm a good boy, then I'll get patted on the head and somebody will say, oh, you're a good boy. Here, I'll give you a raise, or here, I'll give you a bone. But that's the way that we have lived our lives, wanting to get our benefits by doing something for the outside world. And now we're recognizing, oh no, I'm the champion of this show. I'm going to give the benefits. They're right here available.
Mm.
And I'm up to the task. And that's the important point. And I'm up to the task.
Mm. So when you're talking about the connection between the theta of doubt and then personality view, it's kind of as the doubt, as the deepening of the understanding that if certain conditions are created, X, Y, and Z will happen. That's what eradicates the doubt. And at the same time, because of the deepening of the understanding that the results X, Y, and Z are based on conditions, you start to understand that the self is based on this is the same thing. It's a process dependent on lots of things, and therefore the personality view starts to disappear on a kind of experiential deep level.
Mm-hmm. Now, within the Christian context, because the Christians automatically assume that there is a kernel, an essence, a self, a soul, then they have to have all kinds of consternation about free will.
Mm-hmm.
And there's many different word games. Like, of course I have free will. God made me have free will. I don't have any choice. I've got it. Okay, so these are the kinds of thoughts that we can begin to see through. That in fact, if there is a way of discussing it Buddha-wise, it's neither free will nor not free will.
The
And
middle.
the way that you could express it would be, yes, there is will, but it's expensive. It's not free. You got to put some effort into it. Because ordinarily, we don't have free will. We are driven by our old habit patterns that we developed in our life. If we want truly free will, then we would be free enough to actually enjoy life. But that's going to take some work. So that would be then what the skill development is about, that we have to develop the skills in order to be free. That for ordinary people, will is not free. They do live according to a destiny. There is a divine plan. It's just not divine.
No, it's the plan of their bullshit.
It's a plan of bullshit. That's it. Yeah. But it is providential, but we can come out of it by developing the skills we need. And the skills are laid out then of, look at what you're doing. That's one of these one-liners that I love. I've got a whole list of one-liners that looked at correctly, is the sum total of the entire teaching of the Buddha. Now, this tradition the Buddha himself started because he could nail it down. He says, both formerly and now, I teach only one thing, and that is dukkha, dukkha, nirodha. That's all he teaches. Well, there's so many different ways you can say that. Goenka says, never mind, start again. I like, don't worry, be happy. Another one is get happy, stay happy. But there's so many ways of getting it down to a one-liner so that you can come up to that. And so free will would be one of those one-liners, except that the will is expensive. We have to put through, but after we get through, the results will be freedom. And so that's one word, freedom. That's the word. What am I free from? Anything I don't want.
Okay, I'm aware of time, which is unfortunate.
Yes,
really
exactly so. I've just planned it that way.
But yeah, just to quickly then take it back to, and I'll re-watch this video later. I feel like it's been a really rich conversation. Thank you. But just to take it back to like the practical element, because you're talking about the training element of this. This is these are things we train in, and that's how developing them on a kind of like formal sitting basis. Then it's all about kind of so let's say there's a set and experiencing the jhanas, and then you're suggesting a kind of like investigation, like kind of staying right on that line and seeing what allows me to continue there and what pulls me out of it, and kind of gaining insight then into does that sound like what you're saying?
Yes. You might even, in fact, let's see if we can give a short list. The first thing to do is sati, wake up.
Yeah.
The second thing is gladden the mind. Aha, I'm awake. The third one, take a deep breath. The fourth one is feel really good. The next one is feel really satisfied in that state. The next one is stay there.
And
that's the whole.
And so that stay there bit, I think that's the bit that I want to bring a fair bit of attention to in my sit. And you're staying there by kind of zooming out a little bit, having a quite wide awareness of the body, mind, being in the present moment, and seeing what comes in and tries to pull you out of it. Seeing
exactly. That's it. And so that's what we mean by guarding. Within the Mahasi tradition, that would be the noting or the watching, to pay attention, to not let things come in that are not wholesome or worthy of our attention. And so we wisely attend then to the Four Noble Truths. Ah, that's suffering. Oh, I know what caused you, but I'm free of it. And I'm free from suffering because I'm following the path. And so we do that kind of over and over again in that process. Take a deep breath. I see you.
And then, so through that, then the other characteristics just emerge naturally, don't they? If you're kind of you're having that wide attendance to anything that's going to bring unwholesomeness, that's going to bring you out of that wholesome state, you can't but kind of gain insight into impermanence as well.
Precisely so.
You can't but gain insight. Yeah. Oh.
Yes, Anicca is the foundation of all of this, because we're actually in there stirring the pot. We're changing things.
Yes.
As at the same time, we're beginning to see things as they change naturally. But this is all process.
Yeah.
That in fact, that would be a good translation of Anicca. Rather than calling it temporary, you would call it process.
Yeah. Okay. Dhammarato, I'm going to have to go. Thank you very, very much. We'll speak soon. Take care.
Bye-bye, Matt.
Bye.
See you soon.
See you soon.